Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Villain. My junior sisters are all black empresses. Chapter 41. The old man's strikes were as fast as lightning. People around them widened their eyes, and Lin Chengfeng frowned slightly. Seeing that Su Ming and Tang Qingyan had no intention of taking action, and the old man's palm was about to grab Tang Qingyan's shoulder, he suddenly tightened his grip on the long table on the table. Sword. The next second, the spiritual power surged under his feet, and he was ready to save the little beggar huddled in the corner. Buzz. However, something unexpected happened suddenly. Lin Chengfeng seemed to sense it and hurriedly looked up, only to see the old man in black robe. At some point, his palms had stiffened in midair, and his body was trembling slightly. A pair of cloudy eyes were full of intense emotions. Full of fear and shock, the whole person just stood there, motionless. What happened? Everyone was stunned for a moment, but their eyes couldn't help but glance secretly at the man in white in front of them. Half a second later, the old man in black robe lowered his head blankly, looking at the hideous scars crisscrossing his body. He couldn't believe it. That charming woman just lightly plucked the strings of the pipa, and then a burst of spiritual power filled with the breath of death. Sound wave. Did he become like this? The spiritual veins in his body were cut into almost countless segments, and all his spiritual power was reduced to nothing in an instant. Boom! His legs crashed to his knees, the blood under his body stained the ground red, and large drops of cold sweat broke out on his hideous face. Wow! The entire restaurant instantly burst into a huge uproar. The old man in black robe is at the peak of Nirvana realm. They haven't even seen the man in white take action, and the old guy has already been defeated. Lin Chengfeng also choked for breath. Others did not see clearly, but with the blessing of special eye skills, he could vaguely see that the person who took action was not the man in white, but the charming woman next to him. She used extremely powerful, the terrifying sonic spiritual power destroyed all the spiritual veins in the black-robed old man's body in just a moment. At this moment, Lin Chengfeng was deeply shocked. He stared at Tang Qingyan's exquisite and perfect profile. He had already guessed that this woman was definitely not simple, but he never expected that she would be so terrifying. What an amazing woman! Lin Chengfeng sighed inwardly, and something strange flashed across his eyes when he looked at Tang Qingyan. In this world, someone who can use sonic spiritual power to be so proficient, it seems that that woman, even if she is not a disciple of Shengyuan, must be inextricably related to Shengyuan or Tiankui sect. The old voice said to Lin Chengfeng rang in my mind. Lin Chengfeng frowned. Holy Abyss. Tiankui sect. Master, is this a force outside the northern wasteland? He is just a young man from a low-level city in the northern wilderness territory. He has no chance to contact many things outside the northern wilderness territory. He only knows that outside the northern wilderness territory, there is an even larger northern spirit realm, and the entire northern wilderness territory is even bigger. The northern spirit realm is divided into countless realms, and their northern wilderness realm is just the weakest among them. Only in the other realms do more terrifying sects and forces exist. Now, just hearing the word, Shengyuan, gave him a strong sense of oppression, which made the usually calm master's tone become so heavy. This shows that these two forces are definitely not simple. The old voice pondered for a moment, and then said in a deep voice, "Don't ask so many questions for the time being. You have never even stepped into the Spirit Master. The Holy Abyss and Tiankui sect are not forces that you can contact now. In the future, the teacher will naturally tell you." Lin Chengfeng took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Take that little beggar away first. Don't stay in this place of right and wrong." Clear. Lin Chengfeng knew what his master meant, which was to let him get up first and develop steadily. After all, many geniuses died halfway. He picked up the long sword and covered his face with his gray robe. His body quietly flashed and appeared in the corner on the left. While everyone's attention was focused on the old man in black robe, he stared at the man huddled in the corner. The little beggar's eyes fell on her slightly red and swollen face, then he stretched out a hand towards her and said calmly, "If you believe me, then follow me and I will take you out of here." This little beggar is a little girl of about 15 years old. Her hair is tied up with a rag band and rolled up on her head. She has a pair of big clear eyes. She looks at Lin Chengfeng weakly. Although her little face looks dirty, yes, but the facial features are extremely delicate, giving people a sense of elegance. Lin Changfeng couldn't help but think that if this little girl washed her face clean, she would probably be a little beauty. This time, she didn't lose anything, she even made a profit. The little girl stared at him, and he stared at others. The two looked at each other like this for a few seconds. Lin Changfeng was very patient. Under the gray robe, his face that only the little girl could see also looked very gentle. He was just afraid of scaring others. Trust me, come with me. Lin Changfeng smiled gently, trying his best to act like the big brother next door. Maybe it was his smile that did the trick. The little girl relaxed her guard against him a little, but she didn't completely trust him. After thinking about it, she turned her gaze to the old man in black robe in front of her. In his weak eyes, a trace of blood that no one could detect quietly flickered. After a moment, she plucked up the courage and murmured in a low voice, "You help me kill that person, and I will go with you. Otherwise, I won't go anywhere." Lin Changfeng, a little girl who kills people at every turn. He touched his nose and coughed lightly. "Don't worry, that old guy won't live long. If you come with me, no one will bully you in the future." The little girl stared at him seriously. The next second, she seemed to sense something, and she looked forward blankly, and saw that the man in white who had been sitting on the seat just now had stood up casually, and then he turned around, with a long body and elegant temperament. When Chu Chen came out, his handsome face was even calmer. Then he gently raised the wine glass, tilted the mouth of the glass, and poured all the remaining wine into the hideous wounds of the old man in black robes. Hiss! The old man in black robes suddenly roared in pain, his eyes darkened, and he almost fell to the ground. In the end, his body trembled, and his legs kneeling on the ground began to tremble uncontrollably. It hurt, like the flesh on the body was being torn off alive. Countless people swallowed deeply. Ning Xiaoxiao was also stunned for a moment, and then her moist eyes stared blankly at the man in white. Lin Changfeng frowned, and his voice became louder unconsciously, "This is not a good place, nor is it suitable for you to stay. Come with me, and I will find a place for you again, and I can also teach you how to practice." As he said that, he grabbed Ning Xiaoxiao with his palm. Ning Xiaoxiao's eyes were frightened, and her petite body hurriedly stepped back a little, not to be touched by him. Lin Changfeng's face darkened. Why didn't this girl believe him? Did she look like a bad person? Do you have to force him to use strong methods? He didn't know. Behind, Su Ming slowly raised his head, a pair of dark and deep eyes looking at them casually. Immediately, the corner of his mouth was slightly raised, and a sharp dagger was inserted diagonally behind the black-robed old man. Su Ming's indifferent voice also sounded in Ning Xiaoxiao's ears. "Do you want to use this knife to dig out his heart?" There seemed to be some kind of bewitchment in Su Ming's voice. Ning Xiaoxiao was unconsciously seduced by the bewitchment in his voice, and murderous intent surged in her eyes. She lowered her head slowly, thinking of the scene in which her grandfather, who had always been dependent on her, was brutally murdered by the old man in black robe opposite. Her eyes instantly turned red, and even her breathing became rapid. Her chest kept rising and falling. Lin Changfeng was a little unhappy in his heart. He looked at Su Ming, but his eyes glanced at Tang Qingyan beside Su Ming without leaving any trace. His eyes took in her plump and delicate body, and finally he looked back lightly and turned towards Ning Xiaoxiao said, "At your age, you must not stray into evil ways. Even if the old man did something wrong, he has been punished. You should not just pretend to be filled with hatred in your heart. Come with me. In the future, I can teach you how to practice, and I can also teach you the way you conduct yourself. The best immortal spirit cauldron physique. If he wants to be promoted to the God Emperor quickly in the future, he will have to collect 10 of these special physiques to sacrifice. Ning Xiaoxiao will definitely take them away. This special physique can cost 100,000 yuan. There may not even be one among them, so how can they let it go so easily?" Hear what Lin Changfeng said. Everyone in the restaurant fell silent. Everyone looked at the little girl in the corner who lowered her head and said nothing. Behind her, a rich man in rich clothes held a folding fan and fanned it gently, staring at her. The little girl in the corner sighed to her friends around her. "Don't tell others to be kind if they haven't suffered. This little girl, I noticed her just now. She is very pitiful. She probably doesn't have any relatives alive. If she doesn't dare to pick up a knife to resist, I'm afraid she will have to live under the protection of others forever." And if the person who protects her has evil intentions, then she can only be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Sensing the strange looks from the friends around him, the rich man waved his hand hurriedly. Don't misunderstand me, don't misunderstand me. It's purely based on my feelings. Just take it as a joke and just listen to it. These words reached Lin Changfeng's ears, making his face darken slightly. But this time, inside the corner, Ning Xiaoxiao's body, which had been huddled in the corner, slowly got up from the ground. She raised her little head, looking straight at the dagger stuck on the ground with her quiet eyes, and then glanced at Lin Changfeng. I'll do it myself. She gritted her teeth and her eyes were filled with scarlet murderous intent. Growing up, her grandfather, who loved her the most, was brutally murdered by the man in front of her. She would never forget it in her heart. Her grandfather was lying in the dripping blood with a kind face. The way he looked at her lovingly. Even at the last moment of his life, she was still the most reluctant to leave in my grandfather's heart. How could she not miss her grandpa in her heart? This man. She rushed over and pulled up the dagger on the ground with her young hands. She could not suppress the raging murderous intention in her heart. Then she held the dagger in her right hand and tucked the scattered hair on her forehead behind her ear with her left hand. Step by step, he walked to the old man in black robe and looked at him condescendingly. This moment, her petite and exquisite body looked like a cold and bloodthirsty demon in the eyes of the black-robed old man, with nothing but murderous intent in his eyes. Poof! The old man was so frightened by the cold murderous intent in Ning Xiaoxiao's eyes that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he glared at her angrily and roared, "If you dare to kill me, I will slap you to death." Ning Xiaoxiao glanced at him coldly, then raised her head slightly and looked at the man in white in front of her. Her eyes came into contact with him for a moment, but she was attracted by the depth and mystery in his eyes. She held her hand. The arm holding the dagger trembled slightly. Tang Qingyan took the empty wine glass from Su Ming's hand and placed it on the jade plate held by the enchanting woman behind him. Then, she looked at Ning Xiaoxiao with her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "I'm afraid this little girl has never killed anyone before. Bar. The first time you kill someone, you will always be a little nervous." She was the same before. During the family test, when she killed someone for the first time, she might have been more nervous and scared than Ning Xiaoxiao is now. After all, she was only 6 years old at that time. After she got used to it, she didn't feel anything. It wasn't until she met Su Ming, and the man said that he didn't like the way she killed people, that he restrained himself a lot. If not, I'm afraid that many people would die in this Shangshang Tower in one day. Su Ming's eyes were full of interest. He glanced at Lin Changfeng who was staring at Ning Xiaoxiao from behind. Then he took a step forward and asked Ning Xiaoxiao softly, "Have you never killed anyone before?" Ning Xiaoxiao looked at him blankly, her eyes a little dull. She had never seen such a good-looking man since she was a child. Then she realized what he was doing and nodded hurriedly. Su Ming took her right hand and adjusted the way she was holding the dagger. He then held her small hand with his palm and pointed the tip of the dagger at the heart of the old man in black robe. He smiled and said, "From this place, lightly with just one stroke, he will no longer be able to resist." Ning Xiaoxiao breathed in the pleasant masculine scent on his body and felt the warm touch when his palm held her little hand. Suddenly, in the depths of her young heart, there seemed to be something unknown, being touched hard. "Don't be nervous," Su Ming said gently beside her. Lin Changfeng on the side couldn't stand it anymore. He raised his hand and blasted out a burst of spiritual power, knocking the dagger out of Ning Xiaoxiao's hand. Then he said to Su Ming in a bad tone, "Your Excellency, are you doing this? Thinking about the impact it will have on her future life, let's not say whether there is anyone behind this old man who will come to seek revenge on her. Even if he teaches her to kill people like this, it will only lead to her becoming an evil cultivator." He said it righteously. In fact, he didn't want to stand out in his heart, but he was naturally unwilling to give up Ning Xiaoxiao's top-notch fairy furnace physique. In addition, facing Tang Qingyan next to Su Ming, Lin Chongfeng may even have an inexplicable comparison mentality in his heart. Everyone likes excellent and beautiful women, especially a charming beauty like Tang Qingyan. No one can see such a woman being held in the arms of a man other than herself, so it is normal to be jealous and want to show off in front of her. It's normal. Su Ming had long noticed that something was wrong with Lin Changfeng's gaze. He sneered in his heart. This sinister male protagonist was wary, but he was just a hot-blooded young man. It was normal to like beauty. In his previous 5 lives, he had no system and no Goldfinger, in every life, was suppressed by Lin Changfeng because of his status as a villain. All the female protagonists will only have a good impression of Lin Changfeng. This time, he wants to see if the evil male protagonist can win over him. So what if he has the protection of a strong man from the God realm? After depriving him of his destiny and luck in taking over the Northern Spirit realm, he will even want the God realm. The dagger was knocked away, and Ning Xiaoxiao frowned and looked at Lin Changfeng. The old man kneeling on the ground seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. He raised his head with difficulty, looked at Lin Changfeng with a pair of cloudy eyes with great hope, and shouted happily. "Save me. If you save me, I will give you all my wealth and all my spiritual stones. I just ask you to save my life." His heart was full of fear of death. Now he already knew how terrifying Su Ming and Tang Qingyan were in front of him. Although he was living a life of licking blood from the edge of a knife, he didn't want to die yet. The roaring sound attracted people in the restaurant to look sideways. Tisk, tisk, I can't imagine that a strong man at the peak of the Nirvana realm, who is usually such an unattainable existence, is now begging for mercy in embarrassment under our noses. That man in white must be from the Shenyang sect, but I don't know which peak he is from. To be favored by the goddess of Zhangxiang Tower, I'm afraid he must be the #1 figure even within the Shenyang sect. Just because of his temperament, he is destined to be on a different level than us. Although I feel quite jealous, I have to be convinced. We, the disciples of the secular family, can't compare with others, so don't think about it and just drink in peace. A group of people sighed. Many of them have taken part in the Shenyang sect's entrance examination, but unfortunately they are not talented enough and they are not wanted. When Lin Changfeng heard what the old man said, he glanced at the old man coldly and ignored him. He also vaguely learned from the whispers of those around him that Su Ming was probably from the Shenyang sect, and his eyes flickered slightly. The Shenyang sect is one of the 5 major sects in the northern wasteland, and it has been a righteous sect for hundreds of years. However, in his eyes, this Su Ming has a strong smell of evil cultivators, especially if he has teaching a little girl like Ning Xiaoxiao to kill someone is simply not like a good person. May I ask your excellency, are you from the Shenyang sect? Lin Changfeng stared at Su Ming and asked calmly. Su Ming patted his sleeves and didn't even bother to look at Lin Changfeng. He glanced at the black-robed old man underground, then waved his hand towards the enchanting woman waiting aside. Just deal with this old thing, it affects your mood. Quote. The enchanting woman smiled and nodded, yes. With a wave of her long sleeves, the body of the old man in black robe suddenly disappeared from the ground, once again attracting the shocked gazes of a large number of people in the restaurant. Ning Xiaoxiao also glanced at the ground, then raised his head to secretly take a look at the enchanting woman. Su Ming smiled at her, I'll help you kill the person. From now on, you can go wherever you want. Lin Changfeng felt happy. He directly said to Ning Xiaoxiao, do you want to practice? If you want to practice, come with me. I will take you to worship the Shenyang sect. In the future, you will become more powerful than most people here. Ning Xiaoxiao glanced at him and pinched the corner of his clothes hesitantly. Su Ming turned around and returned to his seat leisurely, admiring the 3 women in snow clothes opposite who began to play the piano. Ning go get the jar of spiritual wine I brewed. Tang Qingyan said something to the enchanting woman, then snuggled up to Su Ming again. Seeing Su Ming staring at the 3 women in front of him, she stretched out her slender white hands to cover his eyes and said angrily, don't look. Su Ming. He grabbed the smooth and tender jade hand, squeezed it gently, leaned over and bit her crystal clear jade ear, then raised his head and stared into her eyes, can't you just look at it? Tang Qingyan's cheeks were rosy and she rolled her eyes at him charmingly, you are only allowed to look at me, not anyone else. Su Ming smiled and glanced back at the complicated-looking crowd in the restaurant. He put his arms around Tang Qingyan's slim waist and said, little goblin, those people behind me are probably eager to kill me. Tang Qingyan snuggled into his arms, picked up her black hair with her fingers, and scratched Su Ming's face with the hair of the black hair. She smiled foolishly and said, it's very simple. I just kill them all. So as not to affect your mood. Su Ming shook his head, I told you to exercise restraint. Tang Qingyan puffed her lips, After I got together with you, I seldom killed anyone, just because I was afraid you would be unhappy. Well, it's worthy of praise. I'll reward you for not getting out of bed tomorrow morning." Su Ming pinched her chin and smiled evilly. Tang Qingyan blushed and her legs were slightly numb. Then she stroked the strong muscles of his abdomen with her small hands and said in a quiet voice, "Every time I just talk but don't do anything, it's the most annoying thing." Her voice was gentle and sultry. Su Ming began to feel a little hot in his heart. Rear. Lin Changfeng stared at the backs of Su Ming and Tang Qingyan, who were leaning closely together. He squeezed his palms tightly. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a strong sense of disgust towards Su Ming, and he felt like it in his heart. There was a voice telling him that this Su Ming had taken something that originally belonged to him. Subsequently, he took a deep breath. If Su Ming was really a member of the Shenyan sect, regardless of whether he was an elder or a disciple of the Shenyan sect, if the incident of instigating Ning Xiaoxiao to commit murder was spread today, what would happen to the Shenyan sect in the past hundreds of years? In order to gain a reputation for righteousness, at the very least, he must be severely punished. Lin Changfeng decided that after joining the Shenyan sect, he would first find out Su Ming's identity, and then secretly expose what happened to him today, which would definitely discredit him. In his life, he has never seen such an arrogant and dissolute guy who doesn't take everyone seriously. Who can't pretend to be a pig and eat the tiger? Now he is just tolerating it. With his talent and the lifelong inheritance of the ancient god emperor, who else can surpass him in this northern wilderness territory? But the next second, when he walked to Ning Xiaoxiao and wanted to ask the little girl's name, his eyelids suddenly jumped. When he saw the little girl in front of him, he gritted his teeth stubbornly, walked around him, walked behind Su Ming's seat, and behaved politely. He stood there calmly, not saying anything, just staring at Su Ming. Lin Changfeng was stunned for a moment. There was a sudden anger in my heart. I tried to persuade her with kind words and didn't want this little girl to go astray, but it turned out that she didn't appreciate it. I even said that I would take her away from here and teach her how to practice. In the end, she beat her severely in front of so many people. His face was full of anger, and he was a little angry at the moment. He is not willing to give up on his top-notch fairy furnace and cauldron physique. However, this little girl is unwilling to go with him. Do we need to take strong action? Lin Changfeng was thinking carefully. The other side. Tang Qingyan blew softly into Su Ming's ear, "This little girl is going to cling to you. Also, the person behind you has dirty eyes. I want to gouge his eyes out." Su Ming patted Zhang's shoulder to comfort him. At this time, the enchanting woman named Ninger brought back a pot of fragrant spiritual wine, poured a glass for Su Ming and Tang Qingyan respectfully, and then stood quietly aside and waited, without going to add anything to others. After drinking, as for the job of refilling the wine, it was replaced by another girl in green. Su Ming raised his wine glass, glanced at Ning Xiaoxiao who was standing behind him, looked at her delicate and nervous face, and asked casually, "What's your name?" "My name is Ning Xiaoxiao. How old are you?" 15. Su Ming frowned deliberately. She is only 15 years old. Women who come to Zhangxiang Tower must be at least 16 years old. Ning Xiaoxiao panicked. I'm not. She didn't want to come here. Although she was still young, she and her grandfather had traveled many places since she was a child. Naturally, she knew that the women in the Zhangxiang Tower were not good women. She didn't want to be such a person. Su Ming smiled faintly. "What are you not?" Ning Xiaoxiao took a deep breath, mustered up her courage, bit her lip tightly, and said firmly, "I want to practice, I want to follow you." Su Ming was surprised. "I don't need a girl. Especially there is no shortage of bed-warming girls." Ning Xiaoxiao's eyes dimmed, she lowered her head, stopped talking, and didn't leave, she just stood there. Su Ming swung the glass and put the wine in front of her. "Do you know how to drink?" Ning Xiaoxiao shook his head. "Drink this glass of wine, and I will take you into the cultivation sect. When the time comes, I can also teach you how to practice." Hearing this, Ning Xiaoxiao suddenly raised his head, and without thinking, snatched the wine glass from Su Ming's hand, and then raised his head and drank it in big gulps. Ahem. I drank in a hurry, and I had never drank alcohol before, so I choked on the hot spirit wine, covered my mouth and started coughing violently. Lin Changfeng had already found a new seat and sat down. Looking at Ning Xiaoxiao coughing in pain, he said in a strange tone. This little girl doesn't have any talent for cultivation at first glance. If you don't want to teach others to practice, just say so. Why bother? If a little girl like this really comes from the Shenyan sect, it would be a bit of an insult to the Shenyan sect. His words were heard by many people nearby. These people also looked towards Su Ming with some surprise. They saw Ning Xiaoxiao coughing violently, then continued to drink, and then coughed again. They were all a little confused. Yu Xin couldn't bear it anymore. This poor little girl. Tang Qingyan next to Su Ming gently twisted his arm and rolled her eyes at him charmingly. Why are you bullying this little girl? If you don't want her, I will take her away. Su Ming shook his head. She can't leave here for the time being. Tang Qingyan raised her eyebrows. Why, are you afraid that I will abuse her? That's not true. Su Ming smiled lightly. She was not afraid that Tang Qingyan would abuse Ning Xiaoxiao, but that Ning Xiaoxiao would abuse them in the future. Even though this girl looked weak now, she was the real person whose life was in jeopardy. There are 99 tribulations in her life. From the moment she embarks on the path of cultivation, she will begin to overcome the tribulations. Every time she passes through a tribulation, a sealed memory in her body will be awakened, and her personality will change accordingly. She becomes more and more cruel. When all 99 life tribulations are over, she will completely awaken all the memories of the ancient times and become a cold demon who only knows killing. As far as Su Ming knew, this Ning Xiaoxiao seemed to be the male protagonist Lin Chengfeng's biggest enemy in the future, and the other ultimate boos in the world besides him. Anyway, in the plot after his death, according to some information revealed by the system, Ning Xiaoxiao Hui was betrayed by the male protagonist when he was promoted to the God Emperor. Then she awakened the memory of the ancient times and unified the two worlds of demons and monsters outside the territory. She was a life and death enemy of the God realm guarded by the male protagonist Lin Chengfeng. At that time, she was truly cruel and ruthless, driving the male protagonist, who was the son of destiny, into a state of embarrassment. Su Ming didn't know what the final ending was, because he was already dead by that time. He didn't know whether Ning Xiaoxiao was with Lin Chengfeng in the end. Whether the God realm fell into the system was not revealed, but Su Ming didn't know. Ming knew that the weak and pitiful little girl in front of him would become a being that made the entire world outside the northern spirit realm fear and tremble. He was thinking about whether to take Ning Xiaoxiao to Shenyan sect, or let her join Kaifeng and become his junior sister, and then deny Lin Chengfeng the chance to get close to her, so that she will be betrayed by the male protagonist in the future. Even if she awakens her ancient memories, she will not become the female devil who only knows how to kill. This is not impossible. He has changed many things in this life. You can try to change Ning Xiaoxiao. After recovering his thoughts, Su Ming looked at Ning Xiaoxiao, who was still coughing, and reached out to take the wine glass in her hand. The wine glass was already empty. This girl really dared to drink. Ahem. Ning Xiaoxiao suppressed the burning irritation in her throat. Her big, watery eyes were filled with tears, and she stared straight at Su Ming. Su Ming put the wine glass on the table. I just wanted to speak out. Who would have thought that after the little girl in front of her wiped her dirty little face with her sleeves, she knelt down with determination on her face and kowtowed 3 times towards Su Ming. Her delicate forehead was bruised by her knocks. Read. Disciple Ning Xiaoxiao, pay homage to master. Her childish voice, like the first cry of a baby bird, sounded in Su Ming's ears, and her voice was filled with determination without hesitation. Su Ming, is that a mistake? You get up first, he said quietly. If master doesn't accept Xiaoxiao, Xiaoxiao would rather die on his knees here. Quote. Su Ming felt a little funny. What he said was that he brought Ning Xiaoxiao to Shenyan sect to become a disciple, not to let this little girl become his disciple. I don't know if this girl threatened him on purpose. I told you to get up first. I promised to take you into the cultivation sect, but I didn't say I would accept you as a disciple. Ning Xiaoxiao gritted her teeth and stared at him. Master said just now that after I finish drinking the wine, master will teach me how to practice. Su Ming. There was a stubbornness in Ning Xiaoxiao's eyes. She wants to become a teacher of the man in front of her, she wants to practice with him, she doesn't want to be bullied by anyone anymore. Su Ming remained silent. Somewhere behind, Lin Chengfeng took a sip of wine, his eyes swept over Ning Xiaoxiao's delicate body, and he snorted in his heart. Master, it seems that with this immortal spirit cauldron physique, we have no chance. He was a little unwilling. If the man in white hadn't appeared today, he would have definitely saved Ning Xiaoxiao from the old man in black robe. There is no rush. Our trip is to go to Shenyan sect. If the man in white is really from Shenyan sect, you will meet him sooner or later. When the time comes, you will also have a chance to snatch the fairy furnace cauldron. Lin Chengfeng nodded. That's what master said. His gaze bypassed Ning Xiaoxiao and stared at Tang Qingyan next to Su Ming, his eyes flickering and his thoughts fluctuating in his heart. I wonder if she is also from the Shenyan sect. A warning voice came from Lin Chengfeng's mind. This woman is not easy to mess with. Even my master can't find out her details, and her relationship with the man in white is obviously unusual. You'd better not do anything for the time being. Wrong thinking. Lin Chengfeng curled his lips and said jokingly, the Oran of Zhangxianglu, with powerful sonic spiritual power and a mysterious identity. Anyone who sees such a woman will be a little wary. I think she will come here next time. You can ask her to have a drink with me. No matter what, he was still somewhat envious and jealous of Su Ming. Tang Qingyan was the kind of woman who looked beautiful to the core. Her eyes were full of beauty, and she looked back at Su Ming with a gentle smile. I don't know how many people here looked at her. It's a pity that this kind of charm belongs to Su Ming alone. Lin Chengfeng gently squeezed the wine glass with his palm, and said quietly to the girl in green who was walking by with the wine bottle, pour the wine. The girl in green glanced at him, picked up the jug from the jade plate and poured him a glass of wine. She laughed softly and said, young master, this is the Baihua brewing from our Tibetan incense tower. 50 spiritual stones per cup, I will fill it up for you. Lin Chengfeng's palm suddenly froze. He looked towards the girl in green. 50 spirit stones for a cup. It's so expensive. He came here on the run and didn't have many spiritual stones left on him. Now that he had spent all his money, he only had less than 100 yuan, and most of it was reserved for cultivation. Lin Chengfeng touched his nose in embarrassment. The wine had been poured down, and he was too embarrassed to let others pour it back. It would be embarrassing and embarrassing. The girl still had a smile on her pretty face. She put the wine bottle back into the jade plate and looked at him with a smile. Lin Chengfeng lowered his head and took a sip of wine. Unexpectedly, this Baihua Nong is much more mellow than the wine just now. The key is, it can also increase spiritual power a little bit. The price is indeed reasonable. He raised his hand, and a storage spirit bag appeared in his hand. He paid 50 spirit stones with some pain. The girl in green put away the spirit stone, nodded to him with a smile, and then walked away with the jade plate. Lin Chengfeng looked at the crystal clear liquid in the wine glass, shook his head and sighed, she's so expensive. Immediately, he drank it in one gulp, and his body suddenly became warm. The wine was indeed good. He couldn't help but want to drink a few more glasses. Unfortunately, it was too expensive and he couldn't afford it. There were probably only a handful of people in the entire restaurant who could afford to drink the pot of Baihua brewing in the hands of the girl in green. After all, 50 spiritual stones could be enough for an ordinary family to live for 10 years in the secular world. Even if he uses it to practice, it will be enough for a month or two. After one sip, it was gone. I feel bad. The other side. Ning Xiaoxiao knelt on the ground, holding the corners of her clothes with her little hands, puffing up her chest, and looking at Su Ming with a determined expression. At this time, the sound of the piano in front suddenly stopped. The girl in green clothes came to the seat with a jade plate, glanced at Ning Xiaoxiao curiously, and then placed a pot of spiritual wine that was more precious than Baihua brew on the purple wood table. Tang Qingyan looked at Su Ming with her autumn eyes, and asked him with a smile, are you still drinking? I won't take your spirit stones, and there are free services. Su Ming looked at her with a smile, is it the kind of service I want? As he spoke, he leaned over and whispered a few words in her ear. Tang Qingyan's cheeks flushed instantly, and she hurriedly pushed him away. Starry eyes glared at him angrily, you have a beautiful idea, but I won't do it. Su Ming smiled and said, it's okay, I can do it. Quote. Su Ming poured the wine, took a sip, curled his fingers towards Ning Xiaoxiao behind him, and said softly, come here. Ning Xiaoxiao's face lit up with joy. She quickly stood up and came to Su Ming obediently. She sweetly called out, "Master." Quote. "It's okay to call me master, but why do you call me so sweet?" He looked at the little girl's dirty little face. On her delicate face, there was a clearly visible slap mark, which was slapped by the old man in black robe just now. "Does it still hurt?" He stared at the bloody slap mark and asked softly. Ning Xiaoxiao shook her head hurriedly. "It doesn't hurt." Su Ming raised his palm and motioned for her to stretch her head over. Ning Xiaoxiao knitted her fingers together and lowered her head slightly. Hiss. The next second, she hissed lightly and hurriedly reached out to cover her head. Her head was flicked by Su Ming, and she was so painful that she gritted her teeth. "Does it hurt?" Su Ming asked her. This time, her eyes were red and she nodded weakly. "It hurts." Su Ming smiled and said, "Why are you crying? I can't bear this little pain. There will be times when it hurts more than this." Ah, Ning Xiaoxiao was confused. Su Ming turned to look at the girl waiting aside, and gestured, "Ning take her to the backyard to clean her up, change her into clean clothes, find a room for her to have a good night's rest. I won't take her until tomorrow she leaves." The girl nodded slightly and looked at Ning Xiaoxiao with a smile. "Let's go, I'll take you in." Ning Xiaoxiao is very obedient. It can also be said that she now listens to Su Ming's words very much. Therefore, after getting Su Ming's look, she followed the girl and left here obediently. Seeing the two women leaving, Tang Qingyun's beautiful eyes turned and she looked back at Su Ming. "Aren't you leaving tonight?" Su Ming sighed. "I want to leave, will you let me go?" Tang Qingyun said resolutely, "No." Su Ming shrugged. "Let's agree first, let's stop in moderation. I'm not in good health recently and can't exercise for a long time." Tang Qingyun hugged his arm with a smile and kissed his left cheek. "Don't worry, I love your husband the most. Since I'm leaving soon, I only need 10 times tonight." Su Ming. He glared at Tang Qingyun. "Do you want to murder your husband?" Tang Qingyun raised her alluring snow-white neck and snorted arrogantly. "Anyway, my injuries have healed, and I won't be able to do it even once." Su Ming. He felt melancholy, but when the group of people behind him saw the scene of Tang Qingyun kissing him, their eyes were red with jealousy. Above the sky, black clouds cover the sky. In the Tibetan incense tower, the orioles sing and the swallows dance. An old man in linen clothes with a wine gourd in his hand appeared in front of Lin Changfeng. The old man had been among the crowd just now and had noticed Lin Changfeng. He sat down opposite and put the wine gourd on the table. Lin Changfeng glanced at him. The old man chuckled and stared at the black sword he placed on the table. Hee, this thing is not simple." As he said that, the old man wanted to reach out and touch it. Lin Changfeng's eyes turned cold. He picked up the sword and inserted it behind his back. The old man sighed regretfully. "If this kind of magic weapon can be touched by me, I would be willing to lose a few years of my life." Lin Changfeng frowned. "Old sir, this is just an ordinary longsword, not the magic weapon and treasure you said." "Yes and no, of course you know better than me." The old man smiled mysteriously, suddenly stretched out his palm and pinched Lin Changfeng's arm. "We are destined to meet each other. How about I give you a chance today?" Opportunity. Lin Changfeng was stunned for a moment. Boom. Suddenly, he felt that his arm became extremely hot, as if it was burned by something, and he stared at the old guy with a shocked face. Such profound cultivation. The old man smiled slightly and let go of his arm. Lin Changfeng hurriedly sensed it, and a fiery red mark appeared on his arm. This mark was quite strange. It actually began to absorb the spiritual power in his body bit by bit. Then, 2 light spots flickered in the mark, and then it was like some ancient ferocious beast opened its scarlet eyes. Sensing the violent and domineering power in the mark, Lin Changfeng was a little shocked. The old man opposite picked up the gourd and took a sip of wine, sighing in his heart, "It can fit the ancient evil spirit seal so perfectly. It is indeed a superb physique." "Master, what is this?" Lin Changfeng felt a little weird and hurriedly asked his master in his mind. However, the strange thing is that this time his master remained silent and ignored him. The old man opposite shook his head and smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't harm you. I watched the sky at night and found that there will be a purple dragon with destiny rising into the sky in the northern wasteland. This is a person with destiny in destiny, and there are 10 ancient heavens. The aura of the demon is faintly emerging, and soon there will be chaos here. The Mark I give you can help you contract an ancient celestial demon, and you will be even more powerful when the time comes. You still need to calm down the chaos in the northern wilderness. Hear this. Lin Changfeng was a little stunned. He reached out and touched the red mark through his clothes, and murmured, "Ancient heavenly demon. If you can really contract with this kind of ancient heavenly demon, who will look at those ordinary spiritual beasts?" The next second, he hurriedly clasped his fists at the old man and said sincerely, "Junior Lin Changfeng, I wonder who the senior is, what should I call him?" The old man pointed at himself and laughed, "Me. It doesn't matter what I call you. When you leave the northern wilderness in the future, you will naturally know who I am." After he finished speaking, while drinking, a pair of cloudy eyes glanced at Su Ming in front of him, and then he frowned slightly. Strange. "Old senior, what's wrong?" Lin Changfeng was confused. The old man shook his head and said nothing. But my heart was extremely shocked. The luck on that man's body, one black, one white, one golden, one purple, one red, one dark, was actually more mysterious and mysterious than Lin Changfeng's luck. Such luck was rare throughout the ages. Even he couldn't believe it. "I can't see through it, what a monster man." The old man stared at Su Ming with burning eyes. It was already rare to meet Lin Changfeng. However, this person's luck was even more terrifying than Lin Changfeng's. This thought flashed through his mind, when, suddenly, he discovered that Su Ming in front of him turned his head slightly and glanced towards him casually. There was a smile in his eyes. His whole person was mysterious, giving people a feeling that it was difficult to see through. I can't even see through his cultivation. The old man had used a special pupil technique, but he couldn't even break Su Ming's luck, let alone see through his cultivation. Something's wrong. This person has imperial charm, and he definitely can't be from the northern wasteland. He picked up the wine bottle, glanced at Lin Changfeng, and then poured wine while staggering towards Su Ming. "Old senior," Lin Changfeng shouted softly from behind. The old man waved his hand with his back to him. On the seat, Su Ming was grabbing Tang Qingyun's smooth jade hand and playing with it. Sensing the old man's aura, he chuckled and turned around quietly. A breathtaking purple light flashed in his eyes. The originally dark and deep pupils also turned into a dark purple color in an instant. Buzz! The space behind him suddenly solidified. The old man paused and turned his head to look. The space around him was stagnant. Everyone's body almost stiffened and they kept moving. Then, he raised his eyes and looked at Su Ming, his pupils shrank. In the space behind Su Ming, extremely terrifying auras rose up. In every aura, there seemed to be a horrifying and terrifying shadow emerging from the air. The shadows were so majestic that it was shocking. The old man's eyes were twitching wildly as he stared at the shadows behind Su Ming. He felt like he was about to suffocate. Those shadows, those purple eyes, is that the aura of the Shira Imperial clan? Millions of Shira Imperial army. This young man in white is actually a descendant of the ancient Shira Imperial clan. Was it because he wanted to get close to him that he triggered the protection set up by the ancient powers of the Shira Imperial clan? The Shira Imperial clan is an ancient race outside the northern spiritual realm. It is said that the ancient Imperial clan in Central Continent once surrendered to the Shira Imperial clan. However, tens of thousands of years ago, for unknown reasons, the Shira Imperial clan began to hide from the world. They did not come out, leaving only legends, and their most important feature is the pair of purple imperial pupils that dominate the past and the present. One pupil gives birth to the dark world, and all the emperors are dead. No wonder he has such a strong imperial charm on his body. Could this young man be the prince from the Shira Imperial clan and come to their northern spirit realm to practice and play? The old man no longer dared to take a step forward. Even though his cultivation was among the top in the entire northern spirit realm, facing those terrifying shadows behind Su Ming, he had a hunch that if he took another step forward, the next second, this body would have to be revealed here. I let out a long breath. The old man was in a trance for a moment, and then the solid space in his eyes changed again, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowed through again. Everyone returned to normal in the next second, but no one noticed the terrifying scene just now, and the phantoms behind Su Ming, only he can see it. The old man's eyes were changing, and when he finally saw Su Ming's gaze, he held the wine gourd and clasped his fists towards Su Ming. "I'm being rude." Su Ming smiled faintly and said to the old man, "Senior, are you here to ask for a drink?" The old man was a little embarrassed. He couldn't bear this call from Senior. Su Ming waved to a girl in green clothes next to him, "Send 2 jars of spiritual wine to this senior." The old man felt a little uncomfortable, but although he didn't like the wine here, if it was a gift from Su Ming, he could accept it, and he said softly, "Thank you, sir." Su Ming smiled lightly and looked away. "You're welcome." In the dark sky, the old man appeared with a wine gourd. Glancing at the brightly lit Tibetan incense tower below, his eyes were complicated. In the end, he sighed. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he needed to report to the ancient emperor clan about the Shira imperial clan. If Su Ming was really the prince from the Shira imperial clan and came to practice with them, then what would happen to them in the northern spirit realm? But we must not neglect it. Lin Changfeng's matter was secondary. After making up his mind, he made a move with his palm, and his body suddenly turned into a point of light and completely disappeared from the sky. Not long after the old man left, on the dark Shenyang mountain in the distance, suddenly there was a stream of light flying towards here in an extremely embarrassing manner. After this stream of light, there were several powerful auras closely followed. "Traitor, if you attack and kill the master and seize the sect's treasure, and if you don't let me hold you captive, I will kill you today and bury you alive in the ground." A huge roar echoed across the sky. The powerful aura of spiritual power enveloped the city, causing Kangcheng, which had been silent in the darkness, to become noisy and boiling in an instant. In the Tibetan incense tower, countless people suddenly raised their heads and looked out the window, only to see a man covered in blood. The embarrassed figure, holding a mysterious mirror as smooth as jade in his hand, was rushing towards here. "Who is that? He seems to be being chased by several people from behind." Lin Changfeng also quietly raised his head. Under the gray robe, a pair of calm eyes stared at the figure with twinkling eyes. At this time, the old voice came again in his mind, "You are lucky tonight. I saw that there is no mysterious mirror in the man's hand. If I am not mistaken, it should be left after the ancient heaven and earth mirror was broken. A fragment, also known as Xuantian mirror, is a real low-level magic weapon." Hear the words. Lin Changfeng was shocked. Low-level magic weapon? Or just a fragment? So what level of treasure should the complete version of the Taiku heaven and earth mirror be? As far as he knew, the weapons and magic weapons in this world were divided into 5 levels: mysterious weapons, spiritual weapons, divine weapons, imperial weapons, and immortal imperial weapons. A low-level spiritual weapon can be sold for thousands of spiritual stones. High-level spiritual weapons cannot be bought even if there are spiritual stones in many places. Most of the powerful people who have been promoted to spiritual masters use them. Almost all of them are ordinary spiritual weapons. As for the divine weapons, even low-level divine weapons can already become the treasure of a top sect. His eyes instantly became extremely hot. Originally, because of Ning Xiaoxiao's incident, he felt a little unhappy. Now he not only received the inheritance of an ancient evil spirit mark, but also encountered a low-level magic weapon. This kind of magic weapon was different from the sealed long sword in his hand. Once obtained, as long as the blood contract recognizes the owner, the spiritual power can be used. When the time comes, his nirvana realm cultivation will be able to at least be on par with the strong men in the early stage of the spirit master realm. After being promoted to the spirit master realm, he will be able to exert the power of the divine weapon even more. At that time, even if he has jumped 2 minor levels, it is not a problem to fight against a strong man at the peak of the spiritual realm. What I really like is not the Xuantian mirror, but the ancient heaven and earth mirror. In the ancient dark ages, the heaven and earth mirror was controlled by an emperor and used to fight against the great emperor of the dark tribe outside the territory. Who knew that the great war would happen? It was broken into 9 pieces, and this Xuantian mirror is one of them. I never expected that I would meet you today. It seems that this is really your chance. There were 10 imperial weapons in ancient times, and the Taiku heaven and earth mirror is one of them. If you want to achieve the imperial realm in the future, this imperial weapon, it's just the first pass. I will control your body later and help you capture it. Later, I will find a way to find the other 8 fragments and restore them. Lin Changfeng breathed quickly and nodded heavily. Ancient imperial soldiers. What a treasure of heaven and earth that is, an existence that even countless saints and emperors would be jealous of. If he wants to rise quickly and join the ranks of the world's top experts, he must not give the ancient heaven and earth mirror to others. Call out. In the blink of an eye, the embarrassed figure had rushed to the top of the hidden incense tower. However, at this moment, several rays of light and shadow suddenly came from the Shenyan mountain behind, surrounding it in midair. The spiritual light dissipated, and it was revealed that they were several elders of the Shenyan sect. Among them, the eldest elder Qi Yuan was holding the spiritual secret in his hand. A huge spiritual formation blocked the space in front of him. He stared at the figure in midair, his eyes on the Xuantian mirror. The top is wandering. However, when he saw the man's face, Qi Yuan exclaimed in shock, Jian Yang. Why is it you? He had just sensed a powerful aura heading straight towards Shenyan Mountain in the sect, so he brought several elders to investigate. Who knew it would be the chief of Xuantian sword sect? Disciple, this person went into their Shenyan sect today to investigate the truth, and he was chased here at night. Also, could the thing in his hand be the Xuantian mirror of the Xuantian sword sect? Whoosh! Qi Yuan's voice fell, and the figures chasing him behind Zhanyang also rushed towards him, blocking all the way back. Wu Zongming. Qi Yuan looked at the oldest person among the people and said with a strange face, as the first deacon of Xuantian sword sect, you come to our Shenyan mountain to do something at night, shouldn't you? Do you want to start a war with our Shenyan sect? Rear. There were 4 figures standing in the sky with gloomy faces. Among them, the old man named Wu Zongming by Qi Yuan had strong murderous intent in his eyes. He stared at Zhanyang, who was surrounded by 2 groups of people, and then looked towards him. Qi Yuan said in a dark voice, you old fool, stop talking nonsense to me. This villain stole my sect's most precious treasure, but he came towards your Shenyan sect. How dare you say that this matter has nothing to do with you? I'm warning you, the Xuantian mirror is the sect's most precious treasure that our Xuantian sword sect has guarded for hundreds of years. If you have any ideas, don't blame my sword sect for turning your back on me. Qi Yuan twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a puzzled smile, Xuantian mirror. Since it is your sect's most precious treasure, how could it come to the territory of our Shenyan sect? It must be a conspiracy of yours. Let me take it and take a look. If it's true, I'll come back to pay you respects another day. While he was speaking, he moved his palm like the wind, and suddenly flew towards the Xuantian mirror in Zhanyang's hand. Wu Zongming was furious, you are looking for death. He flashed his body, struck out with a bold palm, and clashed with Qi Yuan. The spiritual shock wave swept out in front of the 2 of them, making a loud explosion in the sky. The 2 of them trembled and took 2 steps back. Wu Zongming snorted, glanced at Zhanyang with cold eyes, and shouted coldly, give me the Xuantian mirror. At this time, many people in the Kangxiang Tower had already come out to watch the show. They learned that the thing in Zhanyang's hand was probably the most precious treasure that Xuantian sword sect had treasured for hundreds of years, the divine weapon Xuantian mirror. Almost everyone's eyes were fixed on it. It became extremely hot in an instant, and his greedy eyes fell neatly on Zhanyang. Among the crowd, Lin Chengfeng took a breath and said, Master, there are 3 spiritual masters in the sky, 1 from Xuantian sword sect and 1 from Shenyan sect. The man who took the Xuantian mirror is also a spiritual master. How can we snatch it? After pondering in my mind for a moment, there was an echo. Leave your body to my control. My current soul should be able to forcibly use the spiritual master's cultivation. However, the time is limited. After seizing the magic weapon, we first escape into the Beiwang Mountains and wait for you to let the soldiers recognize the master, and we will return to Shenyan sect. After the words fell, before Lin Chengfeng could react, an inexplicable powerful force suddenly came from the long sword behind him. This force quickly enveloped Lin Chengfeng's body, and then his eyes gradually changed from the rather revealing look just now. The childish state turned into an extremely deep silence. Lin Chengfeng slowly reached out and pulled up the gray robe behind his head to cover his face. Then he raised his head indifferently, staring at Zhanyang with his dark eyes, and remembered all the escape routes after seizing the magic weapon. After making an accurate calculation and finding that there were no mistakes, he twisted his neck and said with a soft smile, I didn't expect that I have been traveling across the continent for thousands of years, but now I am reduced to fighting with a group of spiritual masters to grab things. It's somewhat ridiculous. The next second, his eyes were cold. Just when he was about to take a step, but before he could take that step, his eyes suddenly changed and he looked up hurriedly. All I saw was midair. At this moment, Xuantian mirror suddenly erupted with an extremely terrifying spiritual shock wave. This shock wave knocked Zhanyang's bloody body away, and then it transformed into a ball of spiritual light and swept across the dark sky. It fell quietly into the palm of a slender hand. Lin Chengfeng's eyes jumped slightly, and his heart was shocked. The magic weapon recognizes its master. How can this be? As we all know, the magic weapon has a spirit. For ordinary people, let alone letting the magic weapon recognize their master, if they are not counterattacked by the magic weapon, they can be called a monster genius, possessing top talent and luck. As for the magic weapon to take the initiative to recognize its master, unless it has a talent that is truly heaven-defying, or in other words, has a terrifying cultivation level that scares the soul of the magic weapon, then it will make it take the initiative to recognize its master. But right now, Lin Chengfeng frowned and stared at the figure in white standing lazily on the Tiangxiang Tower, holding the Xuantian mirror and tossing it gently in his hand with a contented look on his face. His eyes twitched slightly. Could it be said that this person's talent is even more powerful than Lin Chengfeng's? Impossible. His apprentice Lin Chengfeng is already the most talented among all the young people he has ever seen. Just when Lin Chengfeng's master was extremely shocked, Zhang Xiang was upstairs. Su Ming looked up at Qi Yuan and Wu Zongming in midair, then he shrugged and said with a lazy smile, "You all saw it, it fell into my hands by itself." Qi Yuan. Wu Zongming was stunned for half a minute, and then he almost spit out a mouthful of blood. He suddenly glared at Su Ming with murderous eyes. Xuantian mirror automatically recognized its owner and fell into the hands of Su Ming. Wu Zongming was so angry that he almost vomited blood. With a wave of his hand, the three sword sect deacons beside him erupted with powerful spiritual power, surrounding Su Ming from a distance. Three powerful men at the pinnacle of nirvana. The burst of aura shocked many people below. These are the top forces of Xuantian sword sect. 1/3 of the top combat power is here. It is conceivable that the sect must be empty. If there is anyone at this time, if a foreign enemy invades, Jianzong may not be able to bear it. Not to be outdone, Qi Yuan led several elders from the Shenyan sect to stand in front of Su Ming. This person is the top disciple of the 7 peaks of our Shenyan sect. Anyone who dares to touch him will be the first one killed by this elder. The two sides faced off. Qi Yuan brought 4 elders, each of whom was at the peak of the Nirvana realm. However, his own strength was weaker than Wu Zongming. The extra elder at the peak of the Nirvana realm could make up for it. Weak. Qi Yuan, what do you mean? Wu Zongming pointed at Qi Yuan and cursed. Qi Yuan smiled slightly, literally. Wu Zongming. He glared at Su Ming again and stretched out his palm. Boy, give me the Xuantian mirror. Qi Yuan shook his head and smiled. Old guy, before the divine weapon recognized its master, it was a thing without an owner. Your Xuantian sword sect has not been able to make it recognize its master for hundreds of years. It was your own waste. Now it recognizes me as a god. The disciples of Yanzong are the main ones, so don't be jealous. He glanced back at Su Ming, raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Su Ming is a disciple of our Shen Yan sect. The divine soldiers recognize him as their master, which means they recognize our Shen Yan sect as their master. So now, this Xuantian mirror is the treasure of the Shenyan sect. You old guy, you brought people up to my Shenyan mountain in the middle of the night, and you still wanted to seize my sect's treasure. You have ulterior motives. If you don't leave, don't blame me for being rude. Wu Zongming was so angry that his face turned red and his fingers were crackling. He was told nonsense by this old guy Qi Yuan, confusing right and wrong, and Xuantian mirror became the treasure of his Shenyan sect. It was simply unbearable. Things looking for death. His eyes filled with murderous intent locked on Su Ming, and with a sudden squeeze of his hand, countless violent spiritual powers of heaven and earth immediately squeezed towards Su Ming. His overwhelming pressure belonging to a strong man in the spiritual realm also came towards him. He released Su Ming and left. Feeling the powerful and terrifying aura on Wu Zongming's body, the faces of the people below turned pale. Is this the terrifying thing about the powerful spirit master? Just a hint of coercion leaked out made them feel deeply shocked and frightened from the bottom of their hearts. They couldn't imagine what kind of pressure the man in white would bear when he faced this aura. Lin Chengfeng also frowned slightly, his eyes wandering on Su Ming. Boom. However, another majestic aura suddenly erupted in front of Su Ming. Qi Yuan put his hands behind his back and stood in front of Su Ming, catching all Wu Zongming's attacks for him. The two spiritual masters, who could almost be said to be the strongest combatants here, faced each other with murderous intent in their eyes. Several deacons of the Xuantian sword sect were also blocked by the four elders of the Shenyan sect. Their faces were ashen and they wanted to eat these guys from the Shenyan sect alive. Upstairs in the hidden incense tower, Su Ming played with the Xuantian mirror in his hand, taking a leisurely look at the two waves of people in the air, and then looked at Zhanyang, who was knocked into the air by the Xuantian mirror. Sensing Su Ming's gaze, Zhanyang's slightly dazed eyes suddenly flashed with purple light. He squeezed his palms, his eyes were scarlet, and he rushed down with a lunge, pinching the deacon of Xuantian sword sect. The head exploded to the ground, slamming the man's head into the ground. Boom! The gravel splashed, and the faces of the people around changed drastically, and they all gave way, fearing that it would affect them. Zhanyang's cultivation level is that of a spiritual master. Now Wu Zongming, who is also a spiritual master, has been blocked by Qi Yuan. The few remaining guys at the peak of Nirvana pose no threat to him. Zhanyang started to fight back, and his methods were particularly cruel. Of course, this was all controlled by Su Ming. In midair, Wu Zongming's body was shaking with anger. He had no idea why Zhanyang suddenly betrayed the sect, and why their chief disciple of the Xuantian sword sect became so cruel. This must be the Shenyan sect's trick. Yes, Zhanyang just went to Shenyan sect today, and he seemed to be a different person after returning to the sect. It must be the fault of Shenyan sect. Seeing a sect deacon being shot in the head by Zhanyang, the other two deacons' eyelids jumped wildly and they unconsciously took a few steps back. Without Wu Zongming, they were no match for Zhanyang. Evil fellow, I can't spare you. Wu Zongming stared at Zhanyang with murderous intent on his face. He was so angry that he was about to explode. However, he quickly forced himself to calm down. With the old guy Qi Yuan here today, it was impossible to snatch the Xuantian mirror back. Du Kanghai has not shown up yet. Once Du Kanghai comes, they may not even be able to protect themselves tonight. I took a deep breath. Xuantian mirror is important. His life also matters. According to what the Shenyan sect did today, there will definitely be a big war between the two sects in the future. If Qi Yuan had waited for his reaction and joined forces with Du Kanghai to attack and kill him, then today, the gains would really outweigh the losses. With his cold eyes, he glanced at Su Ming below and remembered this person's face in his heart. When he had the opportunity someday, he would definitely capture this person and bring him to their Xuantian sword sect. Not only would he get the Xuantian mirror back, he would also take it back. He also had to kill a good seedling of Shenyan sect, killing two birds with one stone. Wu Zongming naturally knew very well that Su Ming's talent of being able to recognize his master as a divine weapon was definitely rare in the world. If such a person was not from his own sect, he would be an enemy, especially if he was a disciple of the Shenyan sect. He must be strangled in the cradle before he grows up. Retreat. He waved his hand and retreated violently. The other two deacons suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly retreated behind him. They were really afraid that Wu Zongming would get ahead of him and bring disaster to them all. Zhanyang pinched the head of the deacon under him and threw his cold body aside. He didn't know whether it was intentional or not, but it just landed at Lin Changfeng's feet. Then he looked up and stared at Lin Changfeng, grinning. The blood dripping from his face, coupled with his terrifying smile, made Lin Changfeng stunned for a moment. Even Qi Yuan looked at Zhanyang strangely. He was a little confused. Isn't this guy the chief disciple of the Xuantian sword sect? From what Wu Zongming said just now, he must have been stimulated by something. Not only did he attack and kill his master, he also took away the Xuantian mirror. What kind of stimulation can make a man become so crazy? Or was he tricked by his master? A strange idea came to Qi Yuan's mind, and then his eyes flickered when he looked at Wu Zongming. If Du Kanghai hadn't been seriously injured, he really wanted to leave this old guy here today and kill him. Boom! Zhanyang's face was full of madness and he crushed the ground with his foot. Lin Changfeng was shocked. Master. Before he finished speaking, Zhanyang's body shot out like lightning and appeared in front of him in an instant. The blood-covered fist struck hard at his head. Boom! Lin Changfeng took off the long sword with his backhand and slashed it down horizontally. This sword struck Zhanyang's shoulder, leaving a long bloody mark. However, Zhanyang's fist also struck him, sending him flying tens of meters away. The spiritual power exploded. Lin Changfeng calmed down and said, "Is this guy a lunatic? How come he hits everyone he sees? He's not a madman, he's a corpse puppet." Suddenly hearing his master's voice, Lin Changfeng's mouth twitched slightly. Corpse puppet. A corpse puppet at the spirit master level. In this place in the Wild North Territory, a strong person in the spiritual realm is not a piece of cabbage. They are the top combat power of a sect. How could such a strong person be turned into a corpse puppet? So, someone is controlling this corpse puppet nearby. Lin Changfeng was not stupid. He thought of the key point in a flash of his mind, and was a little shocked. There was actually a mysterious strong man hiding nearby to control the corpse puppet. So, everything that happened tonight was probably caused by the guy who controlled the corpse puppet behind the scenes. What does that person want to do? Does he want Shenyang sect and Xuantian sword sect to live forever? If he can really control a corpse puppet in the early stage of the spiritual sovereign realm, then how terrifying his own strength must be. Master, why did he attack me? This teacher doesn't know that there is no strong person in the Wild North Territory who can control the spirit master level corpse puppet. It seems that these two sects have probably provoked someone who shouldn't be provoked. Lin Changfeng frowned. You don't even know who master is. In Lin Changfeng's eyes, his master is unfathomable, mysterious, powerful, and almost omnipotent. Now he can't even find the person who controls the corpse puppet. He doesn't think it's because his master is incompetent, but only capable. I feel that the hidden strong man is too unpredictable. Lin Changfeng looked at the dark sky around him and found no mysterious aura. While he breathed a sigh of relief, he had more doubts in his heart. Then he turned and glanced at Su Ming, who was standing on the hidden incense tower, and quickly shook his head to dispel the unrealistic idea in his mind. Although the man in white was quite extraordinary, he obviously had not yet reached the level of being able to control the spirit master realm corpse puppet. It's someone else. Withdrawing his gaze, Lin Changfeng looked coldly at Zhanyang, who was standing motionless in front of him, and said in a solemn voice, "You and I have no enmity, why do you want to attack me?" Zhanyang turned around stiffly, his face covered with blood and his eyes scarlet. He smiled cruelly, and then struck down with a palm. The surging spiritual power invaded the ground and blasted towards Lin Changfeng. Boom! Blood-red spiritual power burst out from the ground, instantly wrapping Lin Changfeng's body in it. Then, the terrifying force squeezed, making all the bones in his body crackle. Lin Changfeng's eyes were cold, and all the spiritual energy poured into his right arm. The entire arm turned red, and ferocious scales grew under the skin. Then, he clenched his palm into a fist and punched it down. Sword Abyss Forbidden Technique, Bloody Lin Arm. Boom! The blood-red spiritual power in front of him suddenly shattered, turning into spots of light all over the sky, and slowly dissipated. Behind the dots of spiritual power, dots of spiritual light reflected Lin Changfeng's extremely calm face. Mid-air, Wu Zongming and the other two Zhanzong deacons glanced at Lin Changfeng with complicated expressions, and in the end their eyes were filled with contempt for Zhanyang and murderous intent. Immediately, Wu Zongming clasped his fists towards Lin Changfeng. "Young hero, you are good at martial arts. This person is a traitor to our Xuantian sword sect. It is not a pity to die. If you can kill him, young hero, you will have done a good job for our sword sect, a good thing." Lin Changfeng, kill your grandma. If his master hadn't been here, he would have been defeated by Zhanyang long ago. These guys are all a bunch of old foxes. They want to kill someone with a borrowed knife and treat him as an ignorant boy. You're welcome. Lin Changfeng raised his sword and clasped his fists, making a hoarse voice. After speaking, he frowned slightly, put away his sword, and retreated behind everyone. Wu Zongming twitched the corner of his mouth, "But you guys continue to chop me." At this time, Zhanyang stopped chasing Lin Changfeng. He raised his head and stared at Qi Yuan with his scarlet eyes, full of madness. "Qi Yuan, why me?" Boom! Zhanyang's body flashed and he rushed forward. Qi Yuan's face was dark and he couldn't help but complain, "There must be something wrong with this kid's mother. He does it to everyone he sees. It's not like I'm the one who loves you." Complaints are complaints, but he still slapped them down with a fierce palm. The violent spiritual energy mixed with powerful force blocked Jian Yang's violent body. Subsequently, every time Jianyang charged up, he was suppressed by Qi Yuan with all his strength. After 5 or 6 back and forths, Qi Yuan couldn't stand it anymore and his face turned red. This kid is hurt all over and yet he charges so hard. Isn't this kid tired? He's a lunatic. Qi Yuan shouted violently, let's attack together and kill him. Several elders suddenly clenched their fists, but before they could take action, Jianyang suddenly stopped charging. His body was suspended in the air, and his scarlet eyes stared at Qi Yuan so quietly. When Qi Yuan frowned slightly, he grinned, raised his palm and gave a middle finger, then turned around. The blood-red spiritual power surged from his body, turned into a stream of light, and shot directly towards the dark sky outside Shenyang Mountain. Go! Qi Yuan. The crowd below. An elder said with a strange face, Great Elder, do you want to pursue me? Qi Yuan took a deep breath and looked at Wu Zongming and others chasing towards Jianyang. He put his hands behind his back and turned around to land, follow me. The elder touched his nose and smiled awkwardly. Qi Yuan's body landed in front of Su Ming, staring at him with burning eyes. He suppressed the impulse in his heart and asked quietly, as the senior brother of Kaifeng, you should practice well in the sect and give your disciples a name. How could the role of example come to such a romantic place? If I hadn't shown up today, do you know how dangerous it would be? Just that madman Jianyang might hurt him. Su Ming glanced at him and said with some humor, when I come to this place, I naturally drink wine, listen to music, and play some fun games. It's rare to relax. Great Elder, do you want to come with me? I'll treat you. Qi Yuan coughed suddenly and felt the strange gazes of those people below him. His old face was a little embarrassed, and he secretly glanced at the Xuantian mirror in Su Ming's hand, and then said calmly, do you want to put this thing in your hand? It's too safe, otherwise, the sect can keep it for you. It's okay, I picked it up for free anyway, so it doesn't matter if I lose it. Su Ming looked unconcerned and continued, if I sell it, it might still be worth a few spiritual stones. Qi Yuan almost vomited blood. Sold, this is a magic weapon. Do you know the value of magic weapons? When Qi Yuan looked up again, he only saw Su Ming turning around, holding an extremely beautiful and gentle woman in his arms, and walking downstairs. Baby, this mirror is nice. I can use it when you dress up. Tang Qingyan was held in his arms, her cheeks were flushed, she raised her eyes gently, glanced at him with gentle watery eyes, and said softly, thank you, master. You're welcome, as long as you like it, baby. The air was silent for half a minute. Qi Yuan, PFF'd, he was really about to vomit blood. A large group of people outside Zhangxiang Tower were even more stunned, with complex and shocked expressions on their faces and shouts in their hearts. Look at how people pick up girls. No wonder they can win over such a goddess-level figure. She gives them away whenever she wants. Who can be so heroic? Lin Changfeng was also stunned in the crowd. His eyes were full of unwillingness. Su Ming took Tang Qingyan and left gracefully, but the crowd outside the hidden incense tower quietly exploded. Zan Tianjing was a real magic weapon, and many strong men in the Wild North territory coveted it. In the past, he was protected by the Xuantian sword sect, and no one dared to have any thoughts. Now that it fell into the hands of Su Ming, he wondered if those strong men who secretly coveted the divine weapons would come to trouble him. Although they also coveted the magic weapons, no one in the room dared to compete with Su Ming. In their eyes, the Kaifeng senior brother of Shenyang sect, with his unrestrained behavior and extraordinary temperament, was definitely the kind of person who hides his secrets. Only Lin Changfeng, with a slight twinkle in his eyes, now knew that the man in white was the senior brother of the Seven Peaks of Shenyang sect. It was unclear whether there was any background behind him. However, tomorrow he will join the Shenyang sect. When the time comes, he can contact Ning Xiaoxiao and find a way to bring that little girl to him. If there is a chance, he can even snatch the Xuantian mirror from Su Ming's hand, which is one of the fragments of the ancient heaven and earth mirror. 1. You must not give it to others so easily. There are 3 opportunities in total tonight. In the end, he only obtained the ancient evil spirit seal of the old man Calabash, and both the fairy furnace cauldron and the Xuantian mirror fell into Su Ming's hands. This made Lin Changfeng feel a little resentful. If Su Ming hadn't appeared, these 3 opportunities would have been impossible. They should all be his. Mid-air, Qi Yuan stared at Su Ming's leaving figure and gave a wry smile. He had long heard that Bai Qingshan was very strict with her disciple, but now Su Ming went to such a romantic place to look for flowers. If Bai Qingshan knew about it, he would probably get a meal, punishing. Listen, after returning to the sect, don't tell Master Bai about Su Ming's visit to the Kangxiang Tower tonight. He is now the number 1 among the younger generation of our sect, and now he has to be recognized by the magic weapon as his master. In the future, he will be the sect's leader, the pillar of support. We must establish the image of senior brother Kaifeng as a role model for all the disciples of the sect. Those things about him in the past are not allowed to be mentioned again, and the things about the hidden incense tower tonight are not allowed to be revealed. Who would want to make him look for flowers? If the matter is revealed, don't blame me for turning against you. Qi Yuan glared coldly at the elders behind him and warned in a low voice. In the Shenyang sect today, Du Kanghai is seriously injured and cannot recover. He has made the final decision on all affairs of the entire sect. He said that Su Ming is a role model for all disciples. From now on, Su Ming will not only be the senior brother of Kaifeng, he will also be the entire sect. As a role model for all the disciples of the sect, those things in the past can naturally not be mentioned again. Qi Yuan can understand that if a person is not romantic, his youth will be wasted. Especially at Su Ming's age, it is normal to have some hobbies. I think if he could be as carefree and wanton and happy as Su Ming when he was young, how could he end up with no children in his old age? At that time, I only knew how to practice cultivation. Now that I think about it, I regret it. Unfortunately, I am already old. Qi Yuan touched his beard. Shaking his head and smiling, his body's spiritual power surged. Under the countless respectful and complex eyes outside the Kangxiang Tower, his body turned into a stream of light and swept into Shenyang Mountain. Several elders looked at each other, and then hurriedly left. They had known for a long time that Du Kanghai once wanted to accept Su Ming as his direct disciple, but unfortunately, before the follow-up, his sect leader was deposed. Su Ming's talent is now the best in the sect. Even the divine soldiers recognize him as their master. You can imagine what kind of monster he must be. No sect would want such a monster, let alone Du Kanghai. He wanted to accept Su Ming as his disciple, but unfortunately, Su Ming probably still looked down upon them. Bai Qingshan got a good deal, and several elders were somewhat envious. They thought that Bai Qingshan was still a member of the Bai family in Wangcheng, and they were even more envious. Among the young elders in the sect, as well as the other peak masters, there were many people chasing Bai Qingshan at the beginning, not only for her beauty, but also for the Bai family behind her, but no one could win her heart. Now that I think of it, Su Ming was also the disciple adopted by Bai Qingshan since childhood. They were determined to be kinder to Su Ming in the future and teach him more. At the very least, they would have a chance to get in touch with Bai Qingshan through Su Ming. All the elders of Shenyang sect left. Most of the crowd outside Zhangxiang Tower dispersed, but everyone was still filled with deep complexity and shock. In the dark sky, no one noticed that a beautiful figure landed quietly. It was a girl as refined as a green lotus. She was wearing a lavender dress, which outlined a perfect and uneven figure. She was wearing a pair of colorful shoes. Quietly fell behind the crowd, with his hands behind his back, his beautiful eyes looking at the Tibetan incense tower. Lin Changfeng, who was about to leave, suddenly felt something. He turned his head and looked at the crowd behind him. He saw the woman in the purple skirt at a glance. His eyes were stunned for a moment. This woman was extremely beautiful, and her appearance was not even inferior to that of Tang Qingyan, and she has an aura of beauty about her that makes it easy for people to fall in love with her. What a beautiful woman, Lin Changfeng admired in his heart. At this moment, the woman seemed to notice his gaze and glanced at him with a frown. Lin Changfeng smiled slightly, glanced at the Zhangxiang Tower, and then asked softly, "Young lady, are you here to drink too?" Mu Qingyan's pretty face was cold. Seeing the gentle smile on Lin Changfeng's face, she didn't know why, but she had a strong urge to punch him hard in the face. I obviously didn't know him, but in my heart, I felt a disgust for him unconsciously. It was different from the time I hated my senior brother. This kind of disgust came from the bottom of my heart. She glanced at Lin Changfeng with her cold eyes, then looked away, hesitated for a moment, and finally walked towards the hidden incense tower ahead. Lin Changfeng was a little embarrassed, and after thinking about it, he reminded Mu Qingyan, "The restaurant in front is closed, and we won't entertain guests tonight. If you don't have a place to stay, you can come with me. The restaurant where I live there are still a lot of empty rooms." He also knew that he was a little impulsive, but after seeing Mu Qingyan for the first time, he couldn't help but want to strike up a conversation with this girl. In addition, his master suddenly reminded him in his mind that the girl in front of him was probably he also had a special physique, which surprised Lin Changfeng even more. The purpose was to collect 10 special physiques. I originally thought that Ning Xiaoxiao was out of luck, but who knew that suddenly another girl appeared with a special physique as well. I can't let it go this time. Mu Qingyan felt a little angry, but before she could get angry, the closed door in front of Zhangxiang building suddenly opened with a creak, revealing a cold figure in white clothes like snow, standing by the door with arms folded. His eyes stared at her quietly. "Elder brother." Mu Qingyan was stunned for a moment, the coldness on her pretty face quickly melted away, and a smile appeared on her face, and she murmured towards Su Ming. Lin Changfeng paused and looked at Su Ming with a deep frown. Under the faint moonlight, Su Ming hooked his fingers towards Mu Qingyan and said, "Come here." Mu Qingyan's eyes were filled with joy, and she stepped forward cutely and came to him obediently. Su Ming curled his lips, "Coming to a place like this at night, do you think I can't control you now?" Mu Qingyan shook her head hurriedly, stared at him with her beautiful eyes, and said softly, "I saw that you never came back, and I was worried about you." Su Ming sneered, "Worried about me? Are you worried that I will die outside? Wouldn't you be happier if I died?" "I didn't." Mu Qingyan's eyes were so anxious that her eyes were red. "I didn't, I'm just afraid that something will happen to my senior brother, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Su Ming put down his arms and stared at her with dark eyes. Then, he caught a glimpse of a dark alley nearby, grabbed her little hand, took her into the alley, and pressed her against the wall. "Do you think I dare not bully you now?" The cold aura from his body invaded Mu Qingyan's heart, causing the innocent little girl's pretty face to turn red instantly. Mu Qingyan's heart was beating fast and her eyes were trembling slightly as she looked at Su Ming's face close at hand. Her delicate and soft little face was stained with a light pink color due to shyness and joy, making her cute and attractive. At this moment, her big watery eyes seemed to have crystal clear water flowing in them. Her heart was pounding wildly. Then she mustered up the courage to put her arms around Su Ming's neck and offered her the love she had never had before. A touch of red that someone has tasted. Su Ming. The moonlight is gentle and hazy. The two figures gradually overlapped. When Mu Qingyan's red lips came to Su Ming's lips, her delicate body trembled violently. The warm touch from her lips made her fascinated, but at the same time she couldn't believe that she actually kissed him. "Senior brother." Her little face was slightly raised, and her warm and clear eyes looked at Su Ming nervously. Her face was already blushing, and her face was filled with a seductive blush. Her big eyes blinked, and Su Ming's figure was all over her eyes. Su Ming also didn't expect that this little girl would be so courageous. His face was quite calm. He took off Mu Qingyan's little hand from around his neck, grabbed her wrists with both hands and pressed her against the wall. The curvy and exquisite body was trapped in his arms. Who knew that Mu Qingyan didn't resist at all, but was gentle and obedient, without even struggling with her little hands. Su Ming stared at her. Of course he will not forget that in the future, his little junior sister will be a dominating empress, cold, ruthless, and decisive in killing. It is a pity that she was killed by the male protagonist in the end and became a victim on the male protagonist's journey of cultivation. In the first 5 lives, he was just an out-and-out dog licker in Mu Qingyan's heart. Even at that time, he had no other thoughts about Mu Qingyan at all. He just wanted to do what a senior brother should do and protect her, caring about her, who knew that after being instigated by the evil male protagonist, he would become a so-called licking dog. How ridiculous. At this moment, he looked at the girl who was extremely shy in front of him, with slender willow eyebrows, straight nose, slightly red jade cheeks, big watery eyes staring at him without blinking. Her small face was as crystal clear as jade, and her skin was as white snow. Although her figure is slightly petite due to her age, she is extremely beautiful. Su Ming let go of one of her hands, stretched out his hand to hold her chin. His eyes were calm, and he said indifferently, I have told you a long time ago, I am not interested in you now, and I will not like you in the future. The words fell. Mu Qingyun's pretty face suddenly turned pale, her beautiful eyes stared at him blankly, and her heart suddenly felt like she had been stabbed hard by something, and it hurt so much. I don't believe it. Her red eyes became moist, with tears streaming down her face. She broke away from Su Ming's hand and wanted to kiss him again. Su Ming turned his head and hid, preventing her from kissing him. Then he let go of her hand and shook his head gently. Go back early. This kind of place is not suitable for you. Mu Qingyun froze, feeling unbearable pain in her heart. Su Ming's rejection made her heart sink completely, and her whole person became cold and desperate from the bottom of her heart. I won't leave. She gritted her teeth and stared at him. Su Ming smiled calmly. It's up to you. With that said, he turned around and left without any regrets, leaving only a cold and indifferent figure behind Mu Qingyun. Mu Qingyun froze on the spot. The next second, she rushed forward desperately, hugged Su Ming tightly from behind, wrapped her arms tightly around him, and pressed her whole body against him, refusing to let go. Su Ming turned back with cold eyes. Let go. Mu Qingyun hugged her tighter, with a hint of crying, which made Su Ming feel a little moved in his heart. I won't let go. Once I let go, you won't want me anymore. Su Ming. Lin Changfeng on the side couldn't stand it for a long time. Mu Qingyun's pitiful appearance made him feel heartbroken. If such a beautiful girl can bear to refuse, is that guy still a human? The point is, that girl kissed him just now, but he turned away and was irresponsible. It was so enviable and jealous. If it were him, he would have long ago held the girl in his arms and comforted her. He couldn't bear to make the little girl so sad. At this moment, Lin Changfeng felt very unhappy with Su Ming. This guy not only robbed Ning Xiaoxiao and took away Zhan Tianjing, but now the girl he finally wanted to chat with is also related to him. What a bad luck. Listening to the conversation between the two of them just now, it seems that the girl is Su Ming's junior sister, and she should also be from the Shenyun sect. As for Su Ming, it's okay to have Tang Qingyun, but he didn't even let his junior sister go, and treated her like this. It's so hypocritical. Sooner or later, after he joins the Shenyun sect, he will expose this guy's true face in front of everyone. The other side. Su Ming stopped and stretched out his hand to tug Mu Qingyun's little hand. He turned around. Mu Qingyun's eyes were full of crystal tears. Before Su Ming could speak, she threw herself into his arms and buried her head. Reluctant to leave his chest, tears flowed down silently, soaking a large area of the clothes on his chest. Su Ming didn't speak. He quietly felt the extremely soft touch on her body and her body temperature. Finally, he put his palm on her head and said, How old are you? Why are you crying? Mu Qingyun felt aggrieved and uncomfortable. In addition, she had acted so proactively just now. Everyone knew what she meant. However, she was ruthlessly rejected by Su Ming. All the grievances and pains accumulated together and exploded, making she, who had always been strong, couldn't help crying. Su Ming felt funny in his heart. This girl is so funny. He pretended to be cold and said, You are crying. If others see you and think I am bullying you, wipe your tears quickly, otherwise I will really leave. Mu Qingyun obediently wiped her tears, but the more she wiped her tears, the more she wiped them, and her eyes became slightly red and swollen. She knew that from this moment on, her senior brother really didn't want her anymore, and she would lose him forever, which made her how could I not hold back crying. Su Ming was speechless. He reached out his hand and wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. I told you not to cry, are you still obedient? After hearing this, Mu Qingyun stopped crying. She raised her head in his arms and looked at him with red eyes. Her nose was twitching. Her wet and pretty face was full of grievances. There was fear in her eyes. Despair, but also as if there is a trace of unattainable expectation. Su Ming took a breath and glanced at Lin Changfeng, who was standing not far away with gloomy eyes. He raised the corner of his mouth slightly, reached out to touch Mu Qingyun's little head, and untied the hair tie that bound her green hair with his fingers. Opening it, her jet-black waterfall-like hair immediately fell down, and a few strands of hair fell between her tall snow-capped peaks. Su Ming ran his fingers through her silky hair and whispered, It's already very late today. You go back first. If you have anything to do, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Mu Qingyun stared at him blankly. Such a gentle tone made her heart almost melt. Then, she softly exhaled, "Elder brother. I want to stay with you." Su Ming shook his head and let go of her. "Be obedient." "Then will you ignore me in the future?" Mu Qingyan asked him nervously. Su Ming smiled lightly. "It depends on my mood." Mu Qingyan squeezed her little hand. She knew that Su Ming had not completely forgiven her. She knew that the eldest brother's tenderness towards her now was just pity and sympathy for her. This was not love, because the eldest brother was such a hard-spoken and soft-hearted person. He has always cared about and loved her. Even if he hates her in his heart, he can't help but feel sad when he sees her like this. How could she not love such a senior brother? However, she also knew that she had broken her senior brother's heart, but she would not give up. His senior brother would still feel sorry for her, and she still had a chance to get him back. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.